Mercia was settled by sailing down the River Trent. It was founded as the Kingdom of Iclingus around 515 AD, most likely after King Isel, but later came to be known as Mercia around 600 AD. Mercia meant march, which at the time meant the borderlands. This most likely referred to the border between the Angles and the Britons. Their first king was Isel, king of the border folk, who claimed, unlike most, to be from a royal line back in Germania. He was said to be the son of the last Anglic king. Mercia was constantly at war and in skirmishes with Northumbria and the Welsh. Mercia seemed to have adopted a much more complex political structure that's sadly been lost to history. In its early days it may have been much more fragmented than the other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms for a good while. The first named united Mercian king was Creoda in 585 AD, who is known for building a great fortress called Tamworth, which would go on to become the political centre of Mercia. A good case could be made for certain kingdoms being led by dynasties with some Germanic ancestry or ties, but also having origins in, or intermarrying with, native British elites. This would explain why some kings, like the Mercian ones, had Britain-sounding names rather than Anglo-Saxon ones. Mercia grew quickly in power. Edwin and Oswald were both directly or indirectly killed by Pender, king of Mercia, in battle. Pender was a pagan, and after defeating his Northumbrian rivals, he became the most powerful king in the British Isles, and he disliked Christianity. Mercia itself was allowed to expand, unlike other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and it needed to keep a strong military due to having many borders. For centuries, Mercia and Northumbria fought for dominance, with no major victor until King Pender and his son Ethelred. Pender set Mercia up for dominance, while his sons built upon his success. King Oswiu later sought to revenge his brother Oswald in the Battle of the Wynwed in 655 AD against the Mercians. The Mercians had greater numbers but were defeated by King Oswiu and the Bernicians. Pender was also killed in this battle, and Bede marked this as the final defeat and downfall of Anglo-Saxon paganism, and it led to the Conquest of Mercia. Oswiu split Mercia into two. He controlled the northern part, which slowly became part of Northumbria. Pender's son, Payada, pledged allegiance to Oswiu and gave him tribute, and ruled the south of Mercia. However, Payada was killed in Easter, around 5 months into his reign, by his own queen. Oswiu therefore tried to rule all of Mercia directly. However, the Mercian nobles were not too fond of this new Northumbrian king. They drove out Oswiu's governors in a revolt, leading to the installment of King Wulfhere in 658. Although Wulfhere still paid tribute to Oswiu, this was likely just to keep the peace, as Northumbria no longer had any governance over Mercia. Wulfhere expanded south into the Thames Valley and gained much influence in Surrey, Essex, Kent, and as far down as the Isle of Wight. By the end of Wulfhere's reign, Mercia was the biggest and most powerful Anglo-Saxon kingdom. Ethelred took advantage of Egfrith being slain in the Battle of Dan Nectane and managed to take over the whole south of Northumbria after the Battle of the Trent. Northumbria had as many as 11 different kings in this same time period, showing its instability. By 716, King Ethelbald managed to dominate all of the South Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, mainly Kent and Wessex, starting off the time known as the Mercian supremacy. During this time, Mercia was the most powerful kingdom in Britannia. Ethelbald made huge leaps in unifying the Anglo-Saxon world. For example, other southern kingdoms had to get royal assent from Ethelbald for a law to count, though there were rebellions, especially from East Anglia. Some historians speculate Ethelbald could have centralised things a lot more, but he chose not to, letting the other kingdoms keep a fair bit of independence. Ethelbald was also the longest reigning Anglo-Saxon king on record. King Offa was the next notable Mercian king. At the start of his reign, the Mercian dominance had faded, but Offa managed to turn it round. Under Offa, the Mercian supremacy reached its height, and Offa managed to centralise things a lot more. One big example of this was the penny. Offa's gold dinars had the Islamic Shahada on them, while he looked like a Roman emperor on his penny. This was cause he used coins from the Islamic and Roman worlds as templates for his own, without really knowing what the symbols meant. Other rich and powerful nations used coins like that, so he did too. It was his way of consolidating power and showing that Mercia was one of the big boys. Offa is many people's favourite Anglo-Saxon king after Alfred the Great, mostly because of the power and influence he wielded. In many ways, he could even be seen as a forerunner to Alfred. One of Offa's boldest moves was creating the short-lived third archbishopric in Lichfield, showing just how far his authority reached. He also took steps to curtail the Welsh raids. Much like the Scots and Picts up north, the Welsh were constantly raiding into the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and making a nuisance of themselves. Offa took inspiration from Hadrian's Wall and built a dyke, known as Offa's Dyke, along most of the Welsh-Mercian border. Offa's dike stretched 177 miles and was made to stop the Britons from raiding and thieving from Mercia. It was also a political move, letting Offa compare himself to the powerful Roman emperors. The sheer scale of it makes it one of the most impressive earthworks ever built in Britain. He also took inspiration from the Franks, especially Charlemagne. The two even took part in friendly diplomacy. This shows that Charlemagne saw Offa as the most important man in Britannia. Offa worked hard to make himself seem equal to Charlemagne. At one point, Charlemagne wanted one of his sons to marry one of Offa's daughters, which shows the massive respect not just for Offa, but for England itself by that time. The Mercian supremacy died with Offa, and after him, the kingdom ended up ruled by fairly weak kings. The Mercian decline weren't helped by some newcomers. The Viking raids along its whole eastern coast. Alliances and political frameworks that once let the Mercians control those areas were torn apart by the Vikings, leading to Mercia's collapse in power. Be sure to check out my other channel, History Sticks, for the complete, longer, and comprehensive video.